why does my back hurt if I have an active job? Well, there are a number of components that it could be, and it's down to us to be able to figure out what it is. So what we can then do is we can then start reducing that component, and then we can start building blocks in place to be able to overcome the problem that you've got. Some things might be easier to do than others. If, for example, your work is repetitive, that's going to be harder to overcome. So if the work is repetitive, instead of trying to remove that, because we can't, what we would then do is then try to build the building blocks in place for your body with an exercise and a stretch routine that builds your body's ability to cope with that repetitive nature. So the two things with work that we might not be able to change is that it's repetitive and that it has a long duration. So what we've got to be able to do is we've got to be able to put the steps and the building blocks in place with an exercise and stretch program to be able to minimize the risk of those two components. What we then have is people use a poor posture. Now that is something that we can do or do something about. So it's very much thinking about the posture that you're in, thinking about the most ideal posture that you could be in, and then trying to get that balance between those two better. Because what we find is that when it's long duration and repetitive, people will just lose a good posture and they will just use a poor posture just because it's easier to be there. But it's that poor posture that's, in a sense, contributing to the bad back. We also have people use their body incorrectly. So we've just mentioned posture, but also if there's a lot of movement involved, it could be a static posture, but there could also be movement involved. There could be a lot of lifting, and that's something that people would need to be able to do better, is improve their lifting technique, use their joints differently so they're able to minimize the pressure on the joints and minimize the wear and tear on the different areas of the body. And then finally, people are deconditioned. So again, what we tend to find, I work with a lot of sort of manual labourers, generally in sports massage, because the amount of aches and pains that they go through just during their job, they find it hard to do anything else. So what we've got to be able to do is get the body to a condition where it can cope better with the repetitive nature of it and the long duration of it. The way that we do that is by improving posture, improving movement, and improving things like hip flexibility, core strength and stability, improving that movement that I mentioned with regards to the repetitive tasks. It could be being bent over, it could be being in a static posture, it could be lifting technique, it could be holding and carrying technique, all those different types of things. So it's very much sort of putting the blocks in place that we can, as I've mentioned in past videos, to be able to raise the foundation and strengthen the foundation so much that it can cope with those rigors of the repetitive nature of it, of the long duration of it, that we're using better techniques so we aren't putting so much stress on the joint in a way that we can do something about it. Because as I mentioned, we can't necessarily do something about the long duration. We might be able to split up the postures that we're in. So we're doing the work for the same time, but we're using different postures. The repetitive nature of it, if there are different tasks, can we do them in a different order? Can we do them in a different way? Can we split the tasks and do task 1 and then task 2 and then go back to task 1 and back to task 2? So we're just bringing that little bit of variety to the body, which is in some degrees what it wants. So there's a lot of components that we need to think about. There are questions that you will need to ask yourself, but are there things that resonate with you as to why your back might be hurting due to your active job? And then what can you then start doing to mitigate those? What can you start doing to reduce your risk of injury? Can you get involved in an exercise and a stretch program that builds core strength, that makes the hips more flexible, that makes the upper back more flexible? So it's thinking about these things and in sort of building in these different parts to be able to give your body the best chance to reduce its risk of injury. So hopefully that's been helpful. My name is Chris. I'll speak to you in the next video.